Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on tax preparation. We're going to give it another minute or two here for those who are joining to get joined and settled. In the meantime, I have a poll that I'm going to share with the audience that's going to pop up to the right here. And this poll just asks, hey, tax day is around the corner. Are your finances ready? So let us know if you're here, and you can see that poll whether or not you're already prepared for tax season. If you maybe have started, but you're not ready to go yet, or maybe you haven't started at all, this webinar is definitely good for you then. Just give it a moment here. Seems like, just looking at some of the poll answers here, like 20%, 17% of people here are are pretty organized. They say organized all year round for tax prep. So kudos to you guys. We have about 71% of people here, 73% now, that are not yet prepared, but they've started preparing their taxes. I understand why you're here today. And then about 7% haven't started their taxes at all. So this will hopefully be super helpful for you. All right, so I think we can go ahead and get started. We have a good amount of people here. I'm sure there will be some other people that trickle in, but we can go ahead and get started. So for those of you who are not familiar with me, first, just welcome to today's webinar on tax preparation. My name is Nicole, and I'm the Director of Customer Success here at the Neat Company. I'm super excited to show you guys how Neat can help you get organized and prepare for tax season with ease. With me today, I have George, Melissa, and Tia, who are some of our customer success leads here at Neat, and they're here to help me answer all of your Neat-related questions. So as we go through today's webinar, if you have any questions, please go ahead and post those questions in the chat box to the right, and we will try to get you an answer to those before the end of this webinar. We may answer your question live too if we have time at the end. We have quite an agenda today, so we'll see how much time we have at the end. Here is our agenda for today. Today, we're going to talk about tax readiness and how Neat can help you get organized, get your tax documents organized, and prepare your documents for filing your tax return. We're going to walk through several Neat tools and practical tips to help you prepare your taxes. And in addition, we're also going to share like a high-level 5-step guide to tax preparation, including the types of documents that you'll need to file your tax return, how to ensure all your tax documentation is accurate, and how Neat supports you in every step of the way. Throughout this webinar, I have half a dozen downloadable handouts on tax preparation to share with you guys that you guys can download and keep and continue to access as a resource whenever you need it. And then we'll wrap up today's webinar with a Q&A with whatever time we have left. Like I said, we have a lot to cover today, so we'll do our best at the end. Now, before we dive in, I did want to make just a quick important disclaimer that I am not a tax professional, neither is George, Melissa, or Tia, so we can't provide specific tax advice. If you have specific tax-related questions, we can follow up with you to see if we can help guide you a little bit, but we're not going to be able to answer those questions directly. Typically, I would recommend that you reach out or connect with a trusted tax professional for any specific tax-related questions to yourself or your business. However, in today's webinar, we're going to focus on how you can use Neat to prep your taxes and prep your tax return efficiently. All right, so let's get into it. So the key to a smooth tax season is organization. Before you can even think about filing your taxes, you need to get everything organized first. You need to get all your files input into Neat and organized in a way that makes tax preparation simpler. This organizational step is something that you should be doing all year long as well, not just between January and April each year. Spending time weekly or monthly getting your tax documents organized, your expenses organized, saves you time, money, and stress in the long run compared to trying to scramble around at tax time to get everything organized. So we're going to talk about some neat tips that we have for getting organized and staying organized all year long, and kind of the best way to organize your documents if your goal with Neat is to prepare your taxes or to, track your expenses and your tax documents in Neat for tax preparation. Our first tip is that we recommend that you create a folder in your Neat file cabinet simply called tax documents, and that you store all your tax documents that you require throughout the year in this tax documents folder. Keeping all of your tax documents in one folder simplifies organization. It reduces the chance of errors in your tax return by minimizing the risk of overlooking or missing documents that you have saved in many different folders across your database. Having a centralized folder is going to make it super easy for you to find everything you need when you need it. And with all your files, all your tax documents saved in the same folder, you can easily share all of your files at one time with your CPA or accountant through one of the many ways Neat allows you to share documents, either, folder sharing, account sharing, or email sharing. So here, for example, this is what my 2026 tax documents folder looks like. You can see that my folder contains a lot of my income documentation for my tax return, such as my W-2, a copy of my tax return from the previous year, and some of my other tax forms like my 1099 form and my 1098 form. Whether you are filing your taxes for yourself or you're working with a tax professional, having all the forms in one folder allows you and your tax professional to easily access these documents for reference as you're preparing your tax return. So it'll just make it's a super easy way to go in and check all these documents for reference as you're filling that tax return out. But what about, so these are general tax documents. What about the expense documentation? Many Neat users use Neat to track their expenses, and they upload their receipts or their proof of purchases to Neat, and they'll use those receipts as a way to inform what type of tax deductions they can apply for each year. So how do you go about, organizing that expense documentation in Neat? There are two common ways that users store their receipts in Neat. Either they store all their receipts in one yearly folder, or they store their receipts across different folders for different projects and clients and properties. It really depends on what your unique needs are and how you prefer to retrieve your data. Now, my personal preference is to store all my receipts in one centralized expenses folder for the year. And the reason that I like storing all my receipts in one folder instead of multiple different folders is for the same reason I like all my tax documents to be stored in one folder. It's just simply much easier to access, find my receipts, run reports on that data, and also share that data with others whenever I need to. When I store receipts across multiple folders across my database, then there are more chances for me to miss receipts in my final expense report for the year or miss receipts to include for my tax deductions when I submit my tax return. Now, if you are someone who likes to store their receipts across different folders or different projects, clients, and properties, maybe you have a Neat database where you've already set up your folder structure through that way. I implore you to consider maybe ditching the folder structure organization method for that and instead utilizing the project, customer, and location file fields built into Neat receipts to help keep these files organized and separate and easy to retrieve. So you can see in this screenshot here, Neat receipts have these extra file fields built into them. And these file fields act as tags that allow you to quickly find the data that you need without having to create a, confusing or lengthy folder structure. If you would like to switch over from that folder organization approach, maybe you already have a database set up that way and you want to move over and start storing all of your data all of your receipts in like one folder and use these tags instead to distinguish between your clients and your projects and your properties, then you could use our bulk edit files tool that will allow you to quickly change or update some of these files. What you could do is you could simply locate a folder with files that you want to tag, select them all in the folder and bulk edit their project field, their customer fields, their location fields, etc., and even the folders that they reside in all at one time, so that you can kind of more quickly and easily migrate your data from maybe a very complex folder structure to a more simplified folder structure that will aid you in tax preparation. If you would still prefer, if you don't want to do that, you don't want to touch your folder structure, you like it the way it is, you can certainly still store your files or your receipts and expenses across multiple folders within your database. But maybe for tax preparation, one thing I might recommend doing is utilizing our copy feature to copy all of your expenses from all your different folders into one expense folder specifically for tax preparation. Call it my tax preparation expenses folder. And you can go to each folder that you have receipts in for the year, copy those receipts into that tax prep expenses folder. And then from there, it'll be much easier for you to review that data, run reports on that data, export that data, and also share that data with, a CPA or accountant or whoever you need to. The copy file feature, will copy everything, including the file notes, exactly the way the file is. So you'll be able to capture all of that data that you've been tracking all year round in all these different folders. All right, let's see. I'm just checking some questions. Like Brian had asked here, do you have anything like tags? So Brian, the file fields that I was kind of showing you, these file fields act as tags. So when you open a receipt or a document or a bill, you're going to see all these different file fields that you can fill in. Neat will save these files, like anything that you enter into these file fields as a list item. So it'll track the different types of projects or locations or customers you have. And you can also use these file fields, honestly, for anything. You don't have to use them to track specifically a customer or a project. For example, we have like truckers that use Neat, and they'll use, instead of product, they'll put their truck number in the product field instead for receipts for specific truck or specific trips that they made with a specific truck. So you can kind of utilize those file fields for just about anything. And they act as tags, and you can filter by them and run reports with them and all the like, just like tags. All right. So the next tip that I have for getting and staying organized all year long for tax time is to track your expenses in real time, not just at tax time. Tracking expenses in real time prevents errors in your data. It's going to reduce that tax time stress, and it also is going to help you maximize deductions. And then, as another positive, it'll just generally boost your financial awareness for your business or your personal life to help you make smarter, spending and budgeting decisions all year round. Here are some neat tools and some other neat tips that help you track your expenses all year long. So there are at least 6 different ways here that you can add data to Neat. There's the traditional scanning method with our Neat desktop application, so you can turn those physical paper files into digital files. We also have the mobile application. The Neat mobile application also allows you to transform paper files into digital files using your mobile device or your tablet's camera to capture those documents or those receipts. There's also email forwarding. So if you have e-receipts that you're getting sent to your email account, you can forward those directly to Neat. And that's actually a process that can be automated as well. You can add some automation tools to your email inbox that automatically forwards things directly, or certain types of emails or receipts, to Neat. If you have a Windows computer, there is a print to Neat feature that allows you to send order confirmation pages and documents any document that can be printed on a Windows computer directly to Neat. We also have file importing for digital receipts. And lastly, we also have automated streaming, which kicks things up a level. If you have a Neat plus automated insights plan, that means you can also connect your financial accounts, your credit card accounts to Neat and actually see all of those transactions from your bank and credit card accounts to Neat so that you make sure that you don't miss a single expense throughout the year. Really, half the battle of preparing for your taxes, of preparing your tax return, is getting your documents and your expenses organized, whether that's in Neat or some other organizational system. With Neat, you want to make sure that you're utilizing all these different ways that you can add your expenses to Neat. If you can utilize more than one way to send your files to Neat, that will help you stay on top of your expenses and your tax documents year round and help you to avoid any missing expenses at the end of the year and also save you time at the end of the year having to upload and organize your documents then. All right. So another important component in tax preparation is tracking your expenses in real time. Another important component of tracking your expenses in real time is to make sure that your data is accurate, especially your expense data such as your total amounts, your dates, your vendor and location details, and your expense categories. Data accuracy is the most important characteristic that makes your data actually usable and purposeful. Incorrect, incomplete, or inaccurate data will impact your reporting, your budgeting, and your tax preparation. That's why it's super important that you take time to properly review and categorize your files throughout the year, preferably as you upload your expenses to Neat. Taking this extra time to review your documentation will save you money, time, and headaches in the long run. Having a well-organized documentation simplifies audits, it reduces stress, and it's just going to make tax time smoother and more manageable. On the right here, you can kind of see here are the average times it takes you to review files on a daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly basis. As you can see, the more frequently you review your files, the more time you save yourself at the end of the year. Data shows that it takes, on average, just 1 minute to verify your file's data as you enter it into Neat. Just checking to make sure the data is accurate and that it's categorized and that it's in the right folder. That effort increases exponentially the longer that you wait to review your files. So it's super important that you're checking your data for accuracy, you're properly categorizing your files, and you're storing them in a easily retrievable location within your file cabinet before you start prepping your taxes. That's why this is so important for tax preparation. To help you track your expenses in real time and make sure your data is accurate and organized, we recommend setting aside time daily or weekly to upload and review your newly added files and follow our recommended 3-step file upload and organization workflow to make sure your data remains accurate, categorized, and well organized. The workflow goes as such. First, upload your files using one of the several methods that Neat provides for uploading your files. Next, check them for accuracy. Make sure to categorize them with an expense category that best matches the type of expense it is. And lastly, make sure your files are saved in the right folder within your database. Neat helps you with each one of these steps. Neat filters all of your newly added files for you to the Needs Review filter so that you can easily access all of the new things you've added to your database. Neat extracts key information from your files with our OCR technology, such as dates and amounts. Neat also learns your preferred expense categories through smart categorization and will apply your preferred expense categories to vendors that it recognizes, which will also further reduce manual data entry. And then lastly, through many of our upload methods, you can also choose which folder the file belongs to proactively as a part of the upload process. So these 3 simple steps are made even easier by Neat, but these should generally be the steps that you follow for any documents that you're organizing in any document storage solution. Before we move on, I did want to talk more about checking your data for accuracy and what data is actually important to be checking for accuracy. So the IRS, accepts both paper and digital receipts as long as they contain this required information and are stored in a readable, retrievable format. So the IRS needs you to track the amount and the payment type for your expenses, the date, the location or the vendor details, the business purpose or why the expense was necessary and how it specifically relates to your business, and lastly, the recipient or the relationship, if applicable, with whoever the purchase took place with. In Neat, this is where you're able to store all of that IRS required information. So you can store, Neat has built-in file fields for date, payment type, amount, and sales tax. You can store your location details in either the vendor or the location file fields. You can store your business purpose in either the project or the notes field. And you can store your recipient or relationship details in either your customer or notes field. And all of the fields, including the notes, are keyword searchable. So, if you store anything in the notes like business purpose or your relationship details, those are all still keyword searchable in Neat. So once this data is accurate, you don't want to forget about step 2 of our recommended workflow, which is to add an expense category to each file. So for this particular item, you can see that I categorized this one as lodging/hotel. That's the category field I'm referring to. These expense categories are going to be important for you and your CPA and your tax professional to quickly find expenses that may be considered a deduction. As I mentioned earlier, through smart categorization, Neat will learn your preferred expense categories for recognized vendors. But expense categorization for tax preparation is not always as simple as one receipt, one expense category. The IRS requires that expenses be ordinary, necessary, and accurately allocated. That means if a single receipt includes both deductible and non-deductible items, you can't just deduct the whole thing as is. You're actually going to need to split the receipt when a purchase includes like both business and personal items, or it has like mixed use expenses in there, or maybe you have like travel receipts that include personal add-ons or purchases that you made through your travels. You do not need to split receipts when the purchase is 100% business related. Basically, the IRS isn't asking for perfection. They're just asking for reasonable, defensible allocation. So you need to be able to explain what portion was business related, how you calculated that portion, and why the expense was necessary for your business. This is especially important in the case of an audit. If you deduct a full $200 receipt that includes personal items and can't explain those personal items, the IRS can disallow the entire deduction, not just the part of it that is supposed to be deductible. So, our best practice is to split receipts as you capture them, not months later. It's much more faster, more accurate, and reliable, and it's going to protect your deductions to split your receipts as you upload them. And tools like Neat make this much easier to do consistently throughout the year by using our splitting feature tools. So that's something that I did want to demonstrate for everyone here, is how you can quickly and easily split expenses or split receipts amongst different expense categories in Neat and different projects and customers and locations as well. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to pop Neat open and we're going to take a look at how you can split receipts in Neat. 1 second here. Here we're in my Neat account. Like I said, I wanted to show you guys how you can split things in Neat. So I'm going to pull up this Neat building supply receipt here that I have. This isn't a sample receipt, so it's something that I refer to quite a bit. It's just kind of like a sample example receipt that we have built into all of our Neat accounts. So let's say, for example, maybe I have a construction company and I made a purchase at this building supply store, and part of the purchase The belt sander is related to a project that I was doing for my business. And then the remaining items on my receipt, the drill press, the fine sandpaper, the rubber washer, are all actually personal purchases that I made for home improvement or some other project that I have going on or other needs that I have. I cannot submit this to the IRS and fully deduct the full $291.99. I can only deduct, the belt sander and the taxes for the belt sander. So if that's something that you need to do, if you need to split a receipt for any reason amongst different categories or different projects, maybe you have a receipt that has items for a specific one specific project, but then also another specific project, or for two different clients, you can also split things amongst those two different clients or projects, etc. So to split a receipt, what you're going to do is you're going to find that receipt. You're going to, you're going to right click on it. If I can right click on it, I'm having trouble with that. Or you can select the checkbox here and then click split down here. And then Neat is going to take you into a tool that allows you to split this receipt into multiple different expense categories or other categories as well. So the first I'm going to account for the $199.95 that is associated with the belt sander. And when you have a receipt that has taxable items on it, a real receipt with taxable items on it, the receipt will tell you which items are and aren't taxable. And so you can calculate what tax is associated with which line item on that actual receipt. Because this is a sample receipt, we don't have that. So I'm just going to put the full sales tax amount under the line item for the building supplies. I can choose to put this in a specific folder. So we're going to put this in my 2026 business expenses folder. I paid with cash. I can choose a project. Maybe this project was for this site and the location is this location. I can add notes as to why this, why I'm claiming this as tax deductible. I could even add a customer if I wanted to, if I know maybe the customer is Matt Murdock. For any Daredevil fans out there. And then when I'm done, I can go ahead and I can click save and add new. And now I can go in and I can add as many other line items as there are dollars or cents left in this total amount. So for the remaining balance, the 9204, I am just going to put in like home improvement as my category. And we're actually going to save this in my personal folder. We'll save it in my 2026 personal receipts folder. Here, I don't need to necessarily fill in all these other details because they're not specifically associated with a project or anything like that. It's just a personal purchase that I made. And I can click save. Just going back to the building supplies too, you can also add like tax category, or, like a tax form here. If this was, like building supplies, I could add supplies here. If I wanted to update the category better to a specific category that's like, related to deductions on my tax return, I could do that as well. And we'll save again. And then once you have allocated the total amount for each of the line items, you can go ahead and click split. What will happen is Neat is going to create two different items then. So I will actually have two files in my database with the same image, but one item will be associated with my building supplies and all of those details. And the other item will be associated with my home improvements category and all of those details. So we'll go ahead and split. And so here we have my first line item. That is, I open it and I can see that, this is specifically for the home improvement purchase part of that particular receipt. And then I can find the other Neat building supply receipt here, which is now associated with this specific project and this specific deductible amount. So that's how you can go about splitting receipts in Neat for different expense categories, which is going to make your tax preparation and your tax deductions that much more accurate when you're doing your tax filing. It'll hopefully help you to maximize those deductions. Okay. That kind of brings us to the end of the organizational side of tax preparation. As you can see, I talked a lot today about how important healthy weekly and monthly financial and organizational habits are. So I'm going to share a handout with you all now with a list of our recommended, weekly, daily, quarterly, and yearly organizational habits that will help set you up for success for during tax time. I highly recommend reviewing this article, which I'm going to share in a moment, to find habits on that checklist that are going to make the biggest impact in your life or in your business, and trying to adapt them into your healthy weekly, monthly habits to become just a general, more organized individual, and also help you be prepared for tax season when it rolls around. So I'm going to share that handout with you guys now. Like I said, this is something you can download and you can just keep this. This is our recommended organizational habit checklist that you can keep. You don't need to do all of the habits, but you can find the ones that are most important to you and try to incorporate those into your life. So now we are going to get into the second part of tax preparation, which is the output. We know how to get our files into Neat now. We know how to organize them in a way that is going to be beneficial for getting that data out of Neat later for preparing your taxes. So let's actually look at what you can get out of Neat to prepare your taxes. Before I hop into this, I wanted to share one other poll with you guys. This poll is going to pop up here in a second, and it's just going to ask you, are you preparing your taxes for yourself, for a business, or maybe you're preparing them for both yourself and a business? Let us know when that poll pops up to the right. These just help us understand like other types of content that we can put out there that'll help you with your personal taxes, your business taxes, etc. So let us know when you see that poll. Filing your tax return definitely can feel overwhelming because there's a lot of pressure behind, the tax return. If you make mistakes on your tax return, that can lead to audits or missed deductions, all these like very scary real world scenarios that could happen. Our goal today is really to try to simplify that process for you and give you some straightforward steps to prepare your taxes using Neat. To get started, let's quickly take a look at a high-level, simplified view of what steps you need to follow to prepare and then submit your tax return, and how Neat can help you with those steps. So here's our simple, high-level guide. First, you want to check your data for accuracy. You want to look for files in your data that have blank or missing data. You want to look for incorrect data, and you also want to check and look for duplicates in your data as well, both your tax documents and your expense documentation. You want to review those files and then make sure you update them for accuracy. In step 2, you want to maximize your deductions. A tax professional is someone who can certainly help you maximize your deductions the best. Deductions can reduce the amount of taxes that you owe and also increase your overall refund. Neat can help you stay on top of your deductions so long as you stay organized and make sure your data is accurate. In step 3, you need to gather all the necessary documents, all the necessary expenses to submit your tax return, which primarily include like your income and your expense documentation. And we're going to focus most of our time on that, the data that you can gather out of Neat for tax preparation. In step 4, you want to do one final check for any errors in your data, specifically really kind of focusing more now on double checking that the information you're providing, such as like your bank information, your social security information, is all accurate. And then when you're ready, a best recommendation is to file your return electronically, because electronic returns are just faster, straightforward, and they lead to fewer errors in submitting your tax return. As a last step, you want to track and save your refund. Electronic refunds typically process within 21 days. And once that return comes back, you want to save a copy of your tax return for at least 3 years in case you need to reference it later for an audit or for filing your taxes in the following year. And you can obviously use Neat to store that tax return. So I'm actually going to share a handout with you guys right now that highlights some key 2025, 2026 tax updates to be aware of for filing your 2025 taxes. These updates are general and meant for educational purposes. Every tax situation is different, so it's always best to consult a tax professional for advice specific to you and your specific needs. But the changes highlighted in this handout that I'm sharing right now, are things that we've done a little bit of research on, and you might want to put on your radar and just kind of, know has changed for this 2025 tax year. So you can go ahead and download that and keep that. So you'll notice that many of these steps here are the same ones that you should really be taking throughout the year to stay organized and tax ready. The amount of work that you need to do at tax time is directly impacted by how consistently you've stayed organized all year long. If you've been following these organization steps, you have these good financial and organizational habits, tax season is going to feel so much more manageable. But if you have waited until the last minute, you're going to likely spend a significant more time getting prepared. And, you're going to need to go through these steps to get your, all of your data ready for your tax return. We're going to really kind of look at steps 1, 2, and 3 mainly, because those are the steps that NEAT really helps you out with. Even if you are doing even if you're doing this all year long, you still want to do one final check to check that your data is accurate. To do a final check of the accuracy of your data, I recommend using our sorting and our filtering tools in NEAT to quickly find files that have missing data or holes in their data, have incorrect data, or is maybe a duplicate. You can filter your 2025 receipts for blank fields. So there's a screenshot up here at the top right where you can see I'm filtering my vendor by blank. Blank is a field that if you see that field means that I have data in my account or vendors in my account that are missing. I have like a receipt with no vendor in it, essentially. Remember, the IRS requires that your date, your amount, your payment types, and your locations are all accurate. So you can use filtering in NEAT to filter by all of those fields and look for these blank fields. If you see blank, then you know that there are holes in your data somewhere. You should filter by that blank field and then update those fields so that they are accurate. If you don't see blank as a file filter, then that means that there are no blank files or no blank vendors or categories or amounts in your data. Again, this is kind of where having all of your expenses for like your tax deductions in one folder is so helpful, because you can review all of your expenses in one folder at a time rather than having to do this process in multiple different folders across your database. It's really just going to help you track how many receipts you actually have in your database and how many, expenses need to be reviewed before submitting your tax return. Using the sorting feature, you can also sort your grid by date and by amount to see if there are duplicate entries. Sorting your data by date will allow you to see if there are similar purchases on similar dates for duplicates, and same thing for total amount. If you sort your data by amount, you can see if there are, duplicate amounts in there that may show you that you have duplicate entries in your data. And then lastly, you want to also compare your receipts with your statement, your bank statement, your credit card statements, to ensure that there aren't any missing data throughout your NEAT database. As a NEAT pro tip, if you have our NEAT Plus Automated Insights plan, that step's even easier because you can connect all of your financial accounts, your bank accounts, your credit card accounts to NEAT. And then, you can very easily see if there are any missing expenses in your database that don't match these transactions that have come through to NEAT. Our monthly review workflow helps you match the raw data from your transactions and from your statements that are coming through transactions to the matching source documents that you've uploaded to your file cabinet, the proof of purchase that you have in your file cabinet. So it'll just help you clearly identify anything that's missing in your database. The next step in preparing your tax return is to maximize your deductions. Here, you kind of want to do the same thing you did to check your data for accuracy. You want to use the filters and the sorting tools, but this time you want to look for files with blank category, like expense categories. Either blank expense categories or general retail expense categories. The reason being is because general and general retail expense categories are not specific enough. You should review any receipts in your database with a general expense category and see if there's an expense category, a better expense category that fits it. Obviously, not necessarily important if that particular receipt is not something you're submitting for your deductions or anything like that. And then obviously, whenever possible, as a part of this step, you also want to make sure you're splitting your receipts. So if you haven't done that throughout the year, now's the time to go through those receipts and make sure everything's split so that you can maximize those deductions and you aren't penalized for, claiming a whole total amount of an expense when only part of that expense was actually deductible. Once you feel confident that you have all of your data in Neat and that your data is accurate, then you need to gather all of your documents together. So here is a high-level overview of some common documents needed to file a tax return. Additional documents may be required based on your unique situation, but basically it comes down to your income documentation, things like your W-2s, your 1099s, your wages and tips and any compensation that you receive throughout the year. Expense documentation. These are like receipts for medical expenses, childcare, education, and other expenses that can be counted as tax deductions. And as pro tip, if you are using Neat for your business, Neat can also be deducted because you're using it for your business. So make sure you deduct Neat as well. You're also going to need your bank records, such as your savings statements, your interest income, and other records like this that you might need for tax deductions. And then lastly, you'll need a copy of your prior year's tax return, which helps you maintain consistency in your filing and ensures that you don't miss anything from year to year. So we're actually going to share two tax preparation checklists with you right now. These checklists go into a lot more detail about what information and documentation you need to file a tax return. We have a tax preparation list for both individuals and businesses alike. So depending on what your specific needs are, you can download one or both of those checklists. So they're going to become available to you guys in one moment. You can go ahead and download those and keep those. So there are many ways to get your data out of Neat. You can get both your file image data out of Neat. You can export your data to PDF files if you need a PDF file of expenses or your tax documentation. You can also export data out as a CSV file. So all of those file fields, those project, those customer fields, the notes fields, all of those fields are also exportable data that you can export to a CSV file, which you can then import to something like Excel to further slice and dice that data or apply your own business, formulas and functions too. And then lastly, there's also reporting in Neat. So, there's like the Neat expense report. Specifically for expenses and tax deductions, the Neat expense report is especially helpful because the expense report provides you with a summary of all of the expenses in the report along with their expense categories. It provides you with a line-by-line breakdown of all of the expenses in that particular report, including the notes for those files. And then you can also include a CSV export of all of that data as well. So you have it in the report and also as a separate CSV file. And then lastly, the expense report also allows you to include file images. So you can include all of the images of the receipts, all of your proof of purchase receipts to the expense report as well, allowing you basically to give your CPA or accountant essentially everything that they need to review your expenses and maximize those tax deductions. So I wanted to do a quick demonstration for you guys of an expense report in Neat and kind of what you can get out of it. And then we're going to talk about one last thing, which is sharing your tax documents once you've created them. And then we'll move into a Q&A. So just give me 1 second here while I share my screen again. This is where having all of your expenses in one tax prep folder is really going to help you out. Like I stored all my 2025 business expenses. So these are expenses that could be considered deductible in one specific folder. And so it's just going to make it much easier for me to run a report and get all of this data out of me. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on reports here. And I am going to, for spending and tax reporting, we have this expense report here. I want to create this report from files in my file cabinet. So I'm going to click expense report. And then because I have all my expenses in one folder, I just need to filter this report by one thing. And that's my folder. I can choose my 2025 business expenses folder and click save. I know my data is accurate in there. I know that my expense categories are accurate. I know that I've split all of my receipts so that I'm maximizing my deductions, and everything's all stored in that folder. So it makes it very easy for me to quickly run a report on this. So I'm going to just click next step then. I don't need to filter it any more than that. You can go ahead and you can name your report. I highly recommend that you are very detailed in the naming of your report. So I'm going to put 2025 tax deduction report here. I'm going to save it directly back in my 2025 business expenses folder. That way, whenever I go to that folder, everything I need, all the data I need about that folder is in that folder. And then I can add some notes like, send to my CPA for review. And that way I know that this was something that I wanted to have my CPA review so that I can, ensure that all the ways I've split my receipts and categorized my receipts are in the best categorizations they can be for me. I can go ahead and I would highly recommend as a part of this that you include a download as a CSV. So this will take all of those expenses that are in this report, and as a part of the report creation, also create a downloadable CSV file for me so that I can not only have the line by line breakdown, but have all of this data as a CSV file as well. And then I'm going to click create. So Neat is going to work on creating this report in the background. Depending on how much data I have in here, it might take a few moments. Now, ahead of this webinar, I did create an example one so that we could just get right into it. So this is what my expense report will look like for my deductions once it's done processing. I've come through and I did add my own categories and projects to this. I added a project for tax return 2025. Again, I love these file fields as tags so that I can quickly find things like anything related to my tax return for 2025. My report shows me all of the different categories, expense categories that are in my expense report, and the total amount and the total number of receipts associated with that specific expense category. When I scroll down, I also see a line-by-line breakdown of all of the expenses in this report, along with their file notes, along with all of their tax categories, dates, amounts, etc. And then when I scroll down even further, I also have, so that's not a good example of it, but it's just, we have all of the receipt data as well, or the images of the proof of purchase for all of these expenses that I have in my database as well. And so this report really has everything my CPA or accountant or I might need to verify that what I'm filing for my taxes is accurate. If my CPA had a question about a specific receipt, not only can they see the line-by-line breakdown and the notes that I left about that particular receipt, but they can also just scroll to that item within my report and actually see the physical proof of purchase and pull details off it. Maybe I calculated the tax percentage incorrectly, or maybe I need to update something about this, or maybe I can't deduct something on a specific expense, and that CPA or accountant will be able to see those things because all of that data is now in front of them. So that is the Neat expense report, and I think is really helpful because it gives you everything that you need all at one time. This is what the CSV export looks like. So this was the CSV export that was generated just now. We can see that not only do all of the file fields that are included in my expense report come out, but also all of the other fields as well, like my projects, my product and location fields that I can use to further slice and dice this data in Excel if I needed to. Once you have, once you've created that expense report, there are some other things, there are other things that you might want to do to get data out of me, and that would be sharing your documents. So it's, if you need to share your documents with like a tax professional or with somebody else or to yourself so that you can include them in a report or something like that, there are several ways that you can share your files in Neat. One of the ways that you can do that is you can actually email a bunch of files at one time by selecting all of the files and then clicking email. So I could go to my 2025 business tax documents, select everything here, and then email all of these documents at one time to my CPA or accountant. Again, because all my files are in this one folder, makes it super easy for me to send everything at one time over to my CPA or a tax professional. Another way that you can share documents in Neat is through folder sharing. If I didn't just want to send these files to my CPA as an email, I could actually share this whole folder with my CPA or accountant. Then my CPA could log into a Neat account using their own credentials and access this folder and be able to add comments to all these files as well. We could start a working conversation about how I need to upload certain or need to update certain files, or they can ask me questions through comments here, and we can have a very, instead of going back and forth via email or through call, a lot of this conversation can happen within the Neat application itself. And then lastly, you can also share your entire account with the user as well. So all Neat plans come with the ability to add up to 4 additional users to your account. You could add your CPA or accountant to your Neat account, and then they would have access to all of the files within your database. So you could give them access to a specific folder or specific set of folders, or you could give them access to everything if you would like them to be like really hands-on with helping you prepare your taxes. So that is pretty much it. I had a few other handouts that I wanted to share with you guys as well. So I'm going to share those with you now. The first handout I'm going to share with you is sharing your tax documents with a professional. So that's going to pop up in a second here. You might have to scroll down in the handouts because there's so many that I've shared today to find this one. But this particular handout walks you through how to share your files via email, folder sharing, or account sharing with like specific steps. So you can see that there. I also have for you guys, I'm going to share one final handout with you guys. And this is actually the slides that we just went through. So the slide deck that I just presented to you guys is now also something that you can download as well. It has some tips and tricks in there if you want to, take a look at the slide deck again. And the very last thing that I'm going to share with you guys, at least for now, is a tax readiness guide for small businesses. So this is actually a help center article that we put together specifically for small businesses that walks you through 9 steps to year-round tax readiness with a lot of specific practical advice and tips. I highly recommend clicking the link to bookmark that article, and then you can come back to that whenever you'd like. Like I said, it goes far more in depth for small businesses and other things that you should consider for being tax ready year round. So, if that's something, if you're a small business owner, I highly recommend you bookmark that as well. All right, so let's see. What kind of questions here can I answer? So Brian asks, on file sharing, are these sent encrypted or securely to my CPA from the Neat app? Yes, Brian, absolutely. All of the communications and sharing throughout of the NEAT application and into the NEAT application are encrypted. We take your data security very, very seriously. It's our top priority is a data storage solution. NEAT ensures that your data is secure with several robust measures, including bank level security encryption for both stored and transmitted data. So that any data that you're sharing. Our systems are monitored 24/7. They're hosted in leading data centers. NEAT is rarely down. We have a 99.9% uptime, meaning, you'll rarely have issues with being able to access anything. And our systems are regularly audited and penetration tested. So, we do everything we can to protect your data. We also have recently implemented multi-factor authentication as well. So there's that extra added layer of security. You can enable multi-factor authentication in your account by clicking your name up at the top right-hand corner and choosing user profile from the dropdown. And here you can actually enable multi-factor authentication to make it even more secure, ensuring that no one can access your account, even if they have your password. So I hope that helps, Brian. Let's see. John asks, when splitting a receipt, you can't just assign all the tax to the business item. You can only assign that percentage of tax that is directly associated with the business portion. We'll need to add a function to split the tax on the same percentage of the business portion. John, absolutely. And that's actually already a part of the splitting receipt functionality. I just didn't do it at that time because I didn't have my receipt on a real example receipt, like the receipt example I showed you guys was not a real receipt. It was just a sample receipt that I manually created for the purposes of showing splitting. But absolutely, you could, if I wanted to split like this Target receipt, I could, hold on, let me actually load the split feature here. Let me do split. I can put, I can allocate a certain amount of sales tax for this part of it and a certain amount of sales tax for the split item as well. So like maybe only $12, or I'm sorry, maybe only $1 of my sales tax was associated with this particular line item, and the remaining sales tax is associated with my non-business item. And, that goes with this particular split item here. So yeah, you can absolutely split the sales tax too, so that your sales tax that is appropriate for the business or deductible item has the right sales tax percentage on there as well. So I hope that answers your question. I am going to share a survey with you guys right now too. This survey is going to pop up at the bottom left corner. Anybody who's here, this survey just allows you to tell us how we did. Did you find this webinar helpful or educational? Is there something that we can do to improve this? Are there tools missing in NEAT that would help you do your taxes better? You can answer all of those questions by taking that survey, and that will certainly help us, make these webinars even better for you. All right, then. I think that is where we will end it for today. If there are any questions that we haven't answered, do not worry. We will follow up with you later on today or tomorrow and get you an answer to your question. Thank you all. Thank you guys so much for spending a full hour with me. I hope that you guys can walk away with a clear plan for getting organized and feeling confident as tax season approaches, or we're really in tax season already as tax day approaches. I highly encourage that everybody take the best practices that we've shared with you today and try to integrate them into your regular habits, your healthy habits. You're definitely going to thank yourself next year for an easier tax season if you start now. Like I said, if there are any questions, we'll follow up with you guys shortly. Our customer success team is always here to help you. And thanks again for joining us. I will see you all in the next one. Thank you.